Hello, podcast family, and welcome to Regulation Revolution, where we are igniting a revolution to help the world effectively manage and respond to their emotional experiences. It's not about what happens to us, but how we react that creates harmony or chaos in our lives. Emotional regulation is a complex process involving many factors. We offer this podcast to provide insight for you about how you fine-tune and powerfully decide to transform your complex emotional states into empowered instances of self-mastery, peace, and increased awareness. Instead of having your emotions control you, you can learn to have control over your emotions. The following program in no way constitutes therapeutic counseling and does not establish a therapeutic relationship or offer any premise of confidentiality with any listener or participant. For more information, visit us at regulationrevolution.com. Welcome to today's episode of Regulation Revolution with your co-hosts Amy Reamer and Barry Vassar, Heart and Mind. Amy is a licensed therapist, professional speaker, and teacher. Barry is a pre-licensed therapist and practice manager at Heart and Mind. To find out more about Heart and Mind, please visit heartmindrva.com. Welcome once again, podcast family. Today we are discussing regulation in the classroom. What does it look like? How do teachers achieve it? How can we get our children to understand it and to kind of embrace it? You have Amy Reamer here. You have me, once again, Barry Vassar here, with a friendly reminder as well to like us on Facebook. Follow us at Regulation Revolution. You can also sign up for email notifications there, and you can get updates and the latest news and notes. We've covered a variety of areas with regulation, but regulation in the classroom, I think, is a very pressing topic for teachers and for our parents. And Amy, we are here. You've lectured on this before, so I know that you've got some insights that you can share with our listeners and viewers out there.
Yeah, I think the classroom piece is important, one, because it's just like our jobs, right? Kids spend a tremendous amount of time, obviously, in school. Teachers have a really big job. We're talking one nervous system and, adult nervous system and 30 little ones sometimes. And so that's a tough job, that teachers have. We were kind of talking about this before with the teeter-totter. You got a teacher on one end, you got 30 little kids on the other end of a teeter-totter. That's a crazy kind of teeter-totter going on here. How in the world do you keep it balanced, and how do you keep it working well? And there's also some other principles I think that are important we can bring in here to help out with that.
Well, there's so many different X factors, I guess you could say, because you do have 30 different little nervous systems that are each going to bring their own regulation or dysregulation to the table. And, we sometimes forget about the teacher themselves. They have what they bring to the table. Was it an argument with a significant other this morning? Are they in financial crisis? Are they just stressed from work? And I know that, those little children, when we bring that, we talked about it with parents and with children, what that teacher brings to the table can cause dysregulation if they're not well regulated. So it's like there's so many different factors that go into it. One of the things I know you and I had discussed at one point, and I've experienced it having gone to elementary schools, is just the sensory overload that are in some of these classrooms and lunchrooms. And I don't know how our teachers do it. I've told teachers I can't do it.
Yeah. And I've had that where, like with you, and I'm sure they've done this sometimes in schools when they look at behaviors or when is dysregulation happening, right? Or where is dysregulation happening, when you kind of map that out a little bit. And I do that with kids a lot in therapy, trying to pinpoint like what's going wrong, where and when and why, right? And so you're right, like our sensory environments in our schools were not designed with the understanding, obviously, of our nervous systems in mind. And so when you get into so we've talked before about our auditory system is very tied to our nervous system and our survival system. And so high frequencies and low frequencies are distress signals at the high, and then they're predator sounds at the low. And so when you get into a cavernous lunchroom or a cavernous gymnasium with voices bouncing all around, all off of the walls, and screechy sounds from chairs and floors, and you've got all the smells too, like of cafeterias and all of that, it really is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, absolutely.
um, I mean, I've had kids who like refuse to go into the gymnasium because like the bouncing of the balls and the reverberation and the echoes occurring in the gymnasium
Mhm.
were just overwhelming to their nervous systems. Um, so there's, now is that a sign that we need to change that, or is that a sign that our nervous systems aren't handling that as well as maybe they used to be? I don't know. But I think it does speak to that of what's going on in a cafeteria or a gymnasium. Oftentimes that auditory is a big part of it.
Well, not to undermine any of the diagnoses that come out there for children from ADHD to you name it. But one of the things that I have discovered in working with families is what gets overlooked is the idea. Let's just say you're a child that you are overloaded by going into the lunchroom. So your child is fine all morning until about a half hour before lunchtime. Now they can't sit in their seat. They won't sit still. They're not paying attention. They're distracted and everything else. And we quickly say, this happens a couple of times a day. It might be ADHD. It might be this. It could just be they're dysregulated because their stressor is getting ready to happen. So their
Mhm.
tiger is coming out, that threat response, that fight or flight, whether it's the lunchroom, whether it's the playground, maybe it's too chaotic. So those things,
They
I
could
think
be
sometimes
angry.
hmm?
They could be angry.
They could be hangry.
You think about it at home, we recognize that a lot, right? Like when your kid starts getting restless or fussy or whatever, or
Mhm.
babies, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, that's right. It has been a few hours since lunchtime or breakfast time or whatever was the last meal, right? So that stands to reason
Well,
that, they might be hungry.
it's so interesting because and it's not to pick on the diagnosis, but when it comes to ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the accommodations are made that okay, we're going to put child X at the front of the classroom because it will help them focus, or we're going to do this so it will help them pay attention and such. But explaining to a teacher, well, my child has a dysregulated nervous system. So my child actually needs to eat lunch in the classroom. They're like, does he have a disability? Does he have? No, just the lunchroom just regulates him. So if he can eat lunch in the classroom, he'll sit at his desk. Try to explain that or trying to get that. That's part of the reason we're doing this with talking about regulation, is to get folks to understand that there might not be a diagnosis for the child. The
Mhm.
child just doesn't like going to gym and therefore gets fidgety.
Yeah.
And
They may
what
have
do you do?
they could have auditory hypersensitivity. They could
Uh,
have an auditory processing disorder, but people don't that is very often misdiagnosed as ADHD when it's actually an auditory processing disorder. And a lot of times with auditory processing, they can't filter out certain sounds very well. And that's why like a cafeteria would be overwhelming because other people might be able to sort of filter out that
mhm.
annoying sound, but this person doesn't have the ability. Their auditory system isn't working well for that.
And we don't take into consideration this, has dawned on me recently, how little control. When I say a child, I'm talking from elementary, middle, high school. I'm talking this whole area. How little control a child has over their environment. You're in an environment where this is the time you're going to eat. These are your three options in food. This is the time you're going to get recess. This is the time you're going to get gym. Well, maybe I don't want to eat at 11 o'clock in the morning. Maybe I don't like those three picks of food. Maybe I'm more physically active in the morning than in the afternoon. So gym doesn't really work for me. Maybe all my, you and I have talked about morning people and nighttime people. Maybe all my light bulbs don't turn on until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So
Mhm.
anything going on in there could be causing dysregulation. The teacher could be hangry. Maybe the teacher's got lunch duty today, so they don't get to sit in quiet and eat. They've got to monitor what's going on in the classroom. But all of these factors go in there, I think, and we kind of just say, oh, well, our kid doesn't like going to school. And it's like, it's probably not necessarily that, because they could tell you their friends, they could tell you the things they enjoy doing. You can see that some of the classes they really excel in. Um, and then you've got the teacher component of it. How many teachers really enjoy what they do in terms of teaching, but it dysregulates them so much that personally it tears them up. So that's the reason I feel this is such an important topic. But you're right. I think you've encompassed it with 30 nervous systems versus one. And
Mhm.
so we don't think about all of the conditions that go in there. I know there's a couple of points we want to hit on in there, and I do have a story to share with you related to this, but we'll
Yeah.
keep we'll keep plugging forward.
Well, no, share your story. Let's go.
Years ago, I was working with a young individual. Notice I don't even identify anybody. A young individual, and was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and oppositional defiant and everything else. And I worked with this individual for about 6 or 7 months and started noticing there was a pattern. On certain days of the week, this individual would be dysregulated in the classroom. They were fidgety, they were restless, they were inattentive, the whole 9 yards. And they were being medicated for this. And medication apparently wasn't working. Now, that's another topic altogether with me and medication. I'm convinced if you're taking a medication for something and it's not working, then you might not have that something. Okay. Old Barry had overlooked something in this individual's chart. And that was that on a particular day in the previous school year, they had gotten off the bus and they found their parent passed out in the kitchen and thought they were dead.
Oh,
I started looking at the graph. I started making a graph. And what I concluded was whenever that parent this school year did not pick them up from the bus stop, if uncle such and such or neighbor such and such did it, the next 3 days, that's when the kid was off the charts.
mm,
So we had to reevaluate this and say, this child is not with this ADHD, oppositional defiant. I'm not taking away from those real diagnoses. This is why the Ritalin's not working for this particular
mhm.
individual, because it's dysregulation. Whenever picked up early from school, whenever got to the house and the parent wasn't there, but instead the neighbor was watching them or an older brother or sister was watching them. The
Yeah.
next day, the next few days,
Sure.
picture you're a child that goes to
That
school
was
and I don't know if mom or dad is dead when I get home.
right. So when, like you said, when the parent wasn't there or the routine after school got changed, it's that same marker we talked about, that the hippo marks a memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's traumatic. And so what was happening was, the hippo was telling the tiger, "Uh-oh, I think that bad thing is happening again. Look at this. This is similar to what happened before, so maybe this is what's gonna come next." And then the tiger's preparing for that, wakes up, gets into tiger mode, fight, flight,
Mm-hmm.
for a couple days until the owl was like, I've been trying to tell you guys that, mom was fine. This was planned. The neighbor was going to be there. It happens from time to time. We saw mom with dinner last night. She's fine, like, so eventually everybody sort of settles back down, like you said, after those few days. But
Mm-hmm.
because that traumatic memory keeps getting activated,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's like a switch is getting flipped. That's what's happening. And you're right. If the medication is not helping, it's because you're aiming at the wrong target.
Yeah. So I mean, you do. You think about, so you're a child. You're at school. When you go to school today, you don't know who's dead or alive when you get home. And I worked with the teacher on this, and I used an example with the individual teacher where I said, okay, so if you and your spouse had an argument last night, and the spouse said, "I'm leaving you," and you came into work today, Would your head be in the game? Is your head here in the classroom, or is your head back at home with your spouse? And what am I going to face when I get in the door? The argument going to pick back up? Is he or she still there? I said, so picture now you're the child, except he comes to school every day with his mom or dad passed away. What am I going to find? And you're right. It took, now I ain't saying it really did take almost a cognitive approach with working with the child, to where I had to coach the parent and preparing him. Tomorrow, Uncle such and such will be picking you up. Tomorrow, I will be at work when you get home. So your brother / sister, whomever, will be watching you. And once we started making those adjustments, we saw the behaviors go down.
Yeah, because he didn't have he or she, or that child didn't have to wonder why is it different today, or where is mom, or is she okay, because they were prepared for it. And a lot of times we don't recognize that that's the cue, and so we don't do the preparation for kids. And honestly, kids even without trauma probably need a preparation for their routine getting changed. So if typically it is mom or dad picking them up, and tomorrow it's going to be uncle so and so, they need a reminder of it, probably the day before and that morning. Like this reminder, Uncle Barry's picking you up today. So
But it is so many different things. I've witnessed in talking with a couple of teachers. They said they love the fact that parents come to the classroom, want to help with arts and crafts day and want to do these things. But it's almost like it sets off the nervous system of all the other kids. And it's like, I have seen it. I have walked in and had lunch with my own child, and her teacher said she is a totally different child when you came in here to have lunch. Like, she's bouncing all over the place. That's still dysregulated. It's happy, but it's still dysregulation.
And that's a great point, because we haven't talked about this a lot, because I was trying to sort of lay some basics before kind of getting into nuances. What you're talking about is what we would call blended states, and it's also about safety. So excitement is our sympathetic system, but if she's feeling safe, she's just excited. So yes, there's some energy and there's some fight flight. So I think about it this way when we talk about the ladder. She's got one hand at the top of the ladder and one foot in the middle.
Gotcha.
But both feet and both hands have not dropped, right? Because it's about whether is safety present or not. So that's why we say no parts of the ladder are bad. They all serve a purpose and are helpful. But like we said, she was excited that her dad was there, and maybe there's things with the other kids, and what are they going to say? And there's some anxiety there, maybe. But overall, yes, she's in sympathetic and in a little bit of tiger mode, but playful tiger, not fire tiger or ice tiger, like she's playful tiger. So, and all of those facets are probably still there. Owl's still present. The hippo has a gun on it. They're not scared of the playful tiger. Like, they're not going to run from the playful tiger. But they might kind of back up because it's kind of energetic, but yeah.
Well, in mentioning the ladder, I don't want to take us too far off for our listeners, viewers, our teachers. What does it look like when a child is in dorsal at the bottom of the ladder in a classroom? And what I'm thinking of is for our educators to be able to, and parents to be able to recognize where a child is at. Because it's easy to say, this one's dysregulated. They're bouncing out the chairs, or they're biting their nails, or they're flicking somebody in the back of the head. But the kid that's sitting over there, it's all quiet all the time. Where are they at on the ladder? So what would you do? I mean, how would you recognize it, really?
Yeah, you're right. Like, I think the playful tiger or the fire tiger are really easier to recognize and pay attention to, and probably get more attention. Whereas the ice tiger sometimes, again, one nervous system versus 30, it could be easier to, go, oh, they're quiet. Okay, good. Like, they don't need me right now. I can focus over here. I can take care of this. What I would say, the difference between like just more of a quieter, more reserved personality versus a dorsal vagal, it really goes into that I can or I can't space. So
Okay.
when we're in our tiger mode, we're in the middle of the ladder or we're at the top of the ladder, we're motivated, we can still think, we want to get things done. Whereas when we drop down to sort of like the ice tiger, that notice the I can't. So if you have a kid that's over there quiet, but they're doing their work, then they're probably not in dorsal. So I don't want to label like every single quiet kid that they're at the bottom of the ladder, right? Um,
Mhm.
so because you might just have a more quiet, reserved, personality. But if they're doing their work, or when you speak to them, they respond to you and they answer you and they, respond. When you try to interact with them, then they're not in their ice tiger. But if they're sitting there and they're not completing the work, they're just staring down at the desk. Uh,
Mhm.
they haven't even picked up the pencil, or when you speak to them, it's like they don't hear you or they don't respond. That's a sign you may have a kid whose nervous system is slipped into the I can't mode, is in the ice tiger, right? Is frozen. And so they can't engage. They're not looking at you. They're not responding to their friends, right? Like they're not doing the work. Or if you ask questions, all you get are I don't knows. You can't get a straight, answer from them, because they're kind of really disconnected. So I would say that I can and I can't is probably the easiest and simplest way to tell the difference.
So a lot of times, what I'm finding is, or what I've come across, is we're so quick, especially, and I don't want to label any one group, but I'm going to middle schoolers and into high schoolers, the moody teenagers, the moody preteens and such like that. And so many kids are like, I think this child is depressed. And it's like, maybe they're not depressed. Maybe their system is just overloaded by the classroom. Again, the 1 versus 30. What if you got the 1 and the 29, and then you got the 1 that is so much stimulation that they're just overloaded? They shut down. They don't have the fight or flight. They've gone to freeze.
Yeah.
And that's their way of coping with it. So say, I think little such and such may be depressed. I think little such and such could be overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
just really, and the reason I put that is because I want folks to be able to broaden their horizons with not so quick to label with attention deficit, oppositional defiant, depression, anxiety. It could just
Yeah.
be a form of dysregulation you're seeing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what I love about polyvagal theory is it's broad, but yet it's not. So it's
Mhm.
simple, but yet it's broad. It's simple, but yet it's flexible. It makes sense. It really does. I have not found an instance where if you look at a situation like you were just describing, like with the kid or whatever, that you can't explain it via what's going on in their nervous system. You may not know that yet. It might take some investigating, it might take some research, and it might be the current environment, it could be their history, it's more than likely a combination of both. Uh,
Mhm.
because some kids chaos at home when they come into school, it's too calm, it's too organized, it's too regulated. So they want to create chaos, and then like I think you said another episode, we talk about the kid that creates chaos and then sort of sits back
Mhm.
and is happy. And it's because if you think about, let's think about a tune, right? Let's think about music. When we're sad or upset, we often want music that kind of matches that, right? We listen to kind of calmer music, quieter music. We don't want something loud. We're not getting into the rock and roll when we're grieving. We don't typically go to that. But maybe when we're angry or we're upset or we didn't get that promotion we felt like we deserved and we're really annoyed or whatever. We like we often like that, give me some bass, give me some drums, give me some, heavier music, right? To match our mood. So we are very energy based, frequency based people. And so if our energy is up here, we want our surroundings to match it. So that's a way of kind of being heard. Well, for kids whose nervous systems are like this, and everybody
Mhm.
else is down here, well, I don't know how to get down there with you guys, so I'm just going to bring all of you up here with me.
Mhm.
Um, so when I like you said, I just taught on this, or was talking to educators about polyvagal theory and what I call tiger taming drills.
Mhm.
I refer to it because talk about how in schools we have fire drills, we have I don't know if they call them active shooter drills, but I think they're usually just called like emergency drills or crisis drills or something like that. And I honestly could do a whole episode on that because I feel like we're actually making our kids' nervous systems worse by some of these things that we're doing in the schools. Uh,
Mhm.
but the purpose of like a fire drill is to that muscle memory of practicing something when everybody's calm and there is no emergency. So when an emergency happens, hopefully everybody kind of goes to what they practiced. When I think about our nervous systems and I think about regulation, the reality is we really don't probably need to even be practicing that with the kids. The adults need to be practicing that. And that's my personal opinion. This is Amy's personal opinion. Um, is that like active shooter type of drills or emergency type drills, the adults, the staff need to be practicing that. You don't need to be practicing that with the children. I don't know how many kids have come into my therapy room after these drills at school and now are just so scared that someone's going to show up with a gun the next day.
Mhm.
They are creating anxiety in our children by doing what they think is good preparation. And yes, schools need to be prepared for obviously all kinds of different types of emergencies and crises, but that doesn't mean the kids need to be an active part of that. Because if an emergency happens, who are they going to look to? Those 30 kids on the other side of the teeter totter are going to look to the one. So the one needs to be the one that's trained and is calm and knows what to do and knows what the policy is and the procedure is. Um, so that's my like little personal thing around mental health
Mhm.
and regulation in the classroom. But that's my take on it, and that isn't even a personal opinion. That's really based on what I know about our nervous systems and how they work and how we learn. So teach the staff, teach the teachers, teach the administrators, have them practice it, have them run these drills. You can do it on your teacher work days or whatever. But the kids don't necessarily need to practice for that because they need to have a sense of safety in their school. And when you take away the sense of safety, you put them all down the ladder. Now you've created potentially 30 dysregulated nervous systems. Because not all of them they don't have the concept of that risk of that emergency happening or that person coming to the door, even though it's a real risk, is a very minute, small risk for their school.
Right.
And they don't, a lot of their nervous systems and their brains and their development are not at the place that they can recognize that. Most high schoolers probably they can handle that, right? They recognize the reality and all of that. But look, 6, 7, 8 year olds may not have that concept.
Would you would you say, and this, I mean, this is my opinion, and correct me, please. Everybody else does correct me. It's if I'm wrong. I feel like it's more of the weight, unfortunately, shifts over to the educators, to the teachers, in terms of regulation than it does the students, because there's 30 individual nervous systems over here that have many different factors going on from home to school to everything else. And then there's the one which also has many different factors going on home and school. It's not going to be easy for that teacher, and it shouldn't be their job necessarily to regulate 30 different people,
No, and you
but it
really,
is their job to know how to stay regulated.
yeah. And if think about that, this is I would imagine, and I don't know that we wrote this one down, but I just thought about it as a
Mhm.
takeaway. If folks that are listening or watching this, if this is what they, especially if you're a teacher, if this is the only takeaway you get, I'll be happy. It's going to be much easier for you to focus on one nervous system than 30. And I think we tend, and our job and our responsibility and their compassion, like why they became teachers, makes them look to, I've got this responsibility to regulate these 30 little beings. When in reality is that the only one they really have responsibility for is their own. And if they manage their own, I'm not saying that managing your own is going to cause no dysregulation in your classroom. I'm not making that empty promise. But what I'm saying is there are some kids, especially kids with a lot of trauma, that just because and I'll go back to Robin Goebbels saying, just because it's our job to offer safety, it's their nervous system's job to accept it or not. And so if you're regulated, if you're feeling confident, if you're feeling safe, if you're at the top of the ladder, you're doing that hand down, right? So if a kid slips down the ladder, you're able to put that hand out to them, and they might be able to take it and they might not. One question that came up to me from a teacher after the conference that I just presented at, I thought was a really good one, because she said, they get a lot of training, and especially in this conference, it was Attachment Trauma Networks Creating Trauma Sensitive Schools conference. Great conference for teachers and educators. I think they're in Atlanta next year. They were in Dallas this year. But one of the teachers said, we get a lot of help about what to do for kids with trauma, obviously especially in this conference. I'm hoping to get some things out of this that will help the other kids too, especially the ones that are in the classroom when a kid has, a meltdown. And I said, well, I think you're in a good training, because everybody has nervous systems, and all of these parts I'm going to talk about, everybody has. Or you think about the teeter-totter, everybody has a teeter-totter, but the fulcrum is adjusted a little bit differently and is handling things a little bit differently. So we talked a little bit about, like sometimes when kids, and I don't know if you've seen this with your kids or has happened in the classroom, but when one kid's, getting dysregulated and starting to kind of lose it, other kids, of course, their tiger starts to wake up. They're going to try to do something to help. And sometimes they think, oh, if I go give them a hug, or if I go try to give them a high five, or if I got to go talk to them, I can help them, because they're feeling like, oh, I've got this responsibility to help this friend of mine. It could be a friend, it could be a kid they don't like, who knows? But again, their tiger goes, uh-oh, there's a tiger waking up. My tiger needs to go handle it. So, we talked about one part of tiger taming drills is preventative. That's what fire drills are, right? It's all about preventing chaos when there is an actual emergency. And when you have one kid lose it in a classroom, not only do you have their tiger that's waking up, it's now going to start waking up those other 29 other tigers potentially. Right. You're going to have kids with different levels of regulation and different things that wake up their tigers. So may not wake all of them up. And so how do you manage that, right? I mean, it's hard as a teacher. How do you maintain your own sense of safety when you've got a kid that's losing it, and then you're also thinking about the other 29 in their room? That's a tough one.
Well, you mentioned something in there, because we've talked about this before. When the tiger is out and the owl is not present, that wise part of the brain, the logical part of the brain with the child, I know one of the things that we have to deal with is, what do you do with that? So the owl has flown off. Tiger is out. What is a teacher to do with that? I guess maybe a good nonverbal communication, or when there are no words coming from the child, because the owl's gone, we lose our language. We can't think of the words. So we look at, and just a side note for parents out there as well. Sometimes when you're little, and I'm talking littles, maybe 10 and under, look at you and you're saying to them, why did you do that? And they're saying, I don't know. They probably legitimately do not know, or they cannot find the words for it, because they've acted out. The tiger is out, the words are gone, and you're asking me to explain my actions. So now we're in the classroom. Tiger is out, words are gone. Teacher looks at student. What did you do? Why didn't you do this? What were you thinking? So anyway, what do you do with that when the owl has flown off?
Yeah. So, a lot of it just depends on like where is the tiger at, right? And so if the owl is present, then yes, you can use words. But in my tiger taming drills that I teach, one of the one of the rules of tiger taming drills is not using words,
Mhm.
if possible, and especially not using questions. So I always say, if your tiger really, really needs to talk, because as adults, we often want to talk, and
Mhm.
because our own tiger is like agitated, and what do I need to do here? And I get it that like teachers are under a lot of stress because they've got rules in their own school, they've got procedures, they have administrators, you've got parents that so you've got 30 sets of parents that are going to want to know how you handled this and what happened, right?
Mhm.
A lot of stress there. You know, poor teacher tigers are wore out. I can tell they probably got major bags under their eyes. uh, the best advice that I could give to a teacher in that situation is, what do you need to help yourself be okay? Right? Your whole saying of being okay when everything else isn't okay. Well, when everything isn't okay in the classroom, how can I still be okay? And there are different, and we have to look at our own experiences, because some teachers are going to get dysregulated by different things.
Mhm.
Should just a little bit of defiance or maybe some disrespect might be dysregulated to one teacher, where another teacher, it just sort of rolls off their back and it's not that big a deal. Whereas another teacher, it might be more the physical acting out. If they get up and throw paper on the floor, or throw their book on the floor, or whatever, that might be more dysregulating. So you have to learn,
Mhm.
what is it that wakes your tiger up? What behaviors from the kids in your classroom? This is the prep work, right? What do you figure out, for yourself, what's dysregulating, and then why? you know Physical behavior might be, if you grew up in some domestic violence, maybe it's triggering that when a kid
Mhm.
starts getting physically aggressive in the classroom. Maybe the disrespect to you is a sign that I'm not a good teacher, that I'm failing as a teacher. um you know or maybe that's what you grew up with, that was your parents' tiger got woken up by disrespect, and you got in big trouble if you use that language, and now you're just utilizing that same thing. So getting to know your own tiger is the best thing that you can do, and preparing yourself for it. The same way you prepare for a fire, the same way you prepare for another type of emergency, you prepare for, when a kid does something that wakes my tiger up, how do I keep my tiger from taking over? It doesn't mean it can't stir, it doesn't mean it can't be present, but how do I keep it from grabbing that driver's wheel and taking off with me? How do
Well,
I keep my owl present for that?
so as we go into the final few moments here, um, if I'm taking it away from you, and I hadn't really outlined it in my head, but for our teachers, come to know your own tiger. What wakes it up, what gets you tripped, what trips your trigger, what gets you dysregulated. Figure out, and it might take help, but figure out what you need to do to regulate. And then in the moments of non-crisis, when you're not in the classroom, when you're not faced with the situation, when the fire is not here, practice regulation.
Mhm.
Practice, you can practice it through self-talk. I know people who do mindfulness, whole separate topic altogether, but they practice being regulated when there is nothing there to dysregulate them, so that when that moment comes. But it sounds like it really boils down to, for our teachers at least, and it sounds so simple, but it's very complex. What are my triggers? How can I handle them? What is the student bringing up for me? Uh, because I really do think, unfortunately, that regulation, and you nailed it home as well too, falls on the teacher. You can't regulate the other 30. You've got to figure out how to regulate yourself. And
Mhm.
I always joke, kids smell fear like dogs. So, teacher comes in the classroom dysregulated, they smell it. This is the day.
And in tiger taming drills, when I teach it, because I'm typically usually doing it more on a one-to-one basis, like a parent and a child in therapy, that kind of thing. In tiger taming drills in a group environment like this would be more of, what are some, doing the brain breaks, or movement breaks, where, if they've been sitting and focusing for a while, having them do something that crosses midline. So this is some of the things that they were doing at the conference I was at, giving people tools of like brain gym type of things. teaching kids the about their different parts of the brain and normalizing it, because we all have these parts of the brain, right? Kids will often, this is where I usually end up with them in my therapy room, is because they've been having dysregulation, they've been getting in trouble, or they've been failing in certain ways in school. And now their self-confidence has been hit, their self-worth. There's something wrong with me. I'm a bad kid. Like, these are the things going on in their head. The same way teachers may be thinking they're failing, or I'm a bad teacher, or if I did this better, then this kid wouldn't have this problem, right? So that's what I end up getting them is, when that confidence and that self-worth has started taking a toll. And so, us being proactive around, understanding our nervous system and the needs of kids and the needs of development is going to make life for the teacher much better. And then as far as for kids who are maybe like outside of the normal dysregulation realm, so let's look at kids with a lot of trauma, kids with major sensory issues, potentially kids on the spectrum, the ones that, that fire tiger can really kind of take over and start driving the bus. We need to look at how do we help their nervous system. There are some different ways to do that. Like at Heart and Mind, we use the Safe and Sound protocol, which is specially filtered music that uses basically it's a treadmill for the nervous system to give it a workout to build up the ability of that teeter-totter to manage better. That's what the whole purpose of it is. And that was developed by Dr. Porges after, 40 some years of college and academic research on the autonomic nervous system. So it's a newer product, but it's based on 40 years of science and research. So if we can help improve their regulation themselves and the inner workings of what builds their regulation, then we can help them to pause more, to keep the owl there, right? Like, that's the purpose of it, is how do we keep the owl and the tiger and the hippo together working well? So, you can focus on those individuals that have that rather than, continually having a behavior plan that's not leading to any change, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to make actual change, then you have to go to that source of what the issue is. Like you said earlier, if the medication's not working, you're probably targeted the wrong problem. So, if we're not targeting the nervous system, if we're continuing to manage it, Dr. Ross Green was the keynote speaker at the conference I was just at, and he has collaborative, proactive solutions, and he's very much about being proactive. And of course, as we know, a lot of our larger systems are more reactive systems. So that's what our goal would be, is to help a teacher. So I'm not talking about a whole school system, but helping a teacher to be more proactive in their own classroom, because that's the only thing they really have a lot of control over, right?
I mean, yeah, you don't know what war zone they're walking into on a given any day.
My shirt, I talked about
chaos coordinator.
There's a teacher. I didn't plan this either, guys. I just put this on. This was my boss shirt for running a business, but like when you're running a classroom, you are the chaos coordinator.
Amy, thanks again for what you're bringing to the table with regulation, for letting me be a part of this. And I like this regulation in different environments that we're doing. Quick thing I want to put out there for our listeners and our viewers, depending on when you're listening to this or watching this, we do have episodes specific for the tiger, the owl, and the hippo. They each will have their own episodes and be featured to explain this a little bit more, these parts of the brain and how they work individually, how they work together, and how sometimes they don't work. So please look out for those. For Amy and I, we want to thank you again for joining us. And again, remember, like us on Facebook, follow us at Regulation Revolution. You can also sign up for email notifications there. You can find the link to our YouTube channel for those that are more visual, want to be able to see us and see who's talking to you. Go to our YouTube channel, and you can also get the updates on the latest news and notes and upcoming episodes. Amy, anything to wrap up with after all of that?
Yeah, I want to give the resources that I want to share in case people want to look into some systems that are out there that are, giving those like tools. So Bruce Perry's Child Trauma Academy, they have the neurosequential model for education. So I'm trained in the neurosequential model of therapeutics, but they have one specifically for educators and educators education systems that they want to put in this a regulatory plan for their school. So I would look into that. There is also a fantastic educator who has a Facebook page. I'm sure she has some other things, but I've just seen her on Facebook, and it's the Regulated Classroom. And so if you go on Facebook and look for the Regulated Classroom, she's got lots of great tips and information, and it's very specific, obviously, to regulation in the classroom. So if you take our little teeny bit we're talking about today, that's what her focus is. So I would look into that, and she's on my short list of people to look into to see about us having as a guest on our podcast. So we can get some more tips from folks that are in that. But again, these episodes we could go so many different directions on tiger tame. We could do an episode on the tiger taming drills specifically because they can be done in the classroom, they can be done at home. All of that good stuff. So we can definitely talk through that, in other episodes.
All right. All right. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in, watching, listening, whatever you may do, and check us back out again. Check out what episodes we do have out there. Amy, thanks for playing along.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Following program includes stories and situations that are not intended to identify any client or individual. Any similarities are coincidental and should not be considered reflective of any one person or group of people. The preceding program in no way constitutes therapeutic counseling and does not establish a therapeutic relationship or offer any premise of confidentiality with any listener or participant. If you or someone you know is in need of counseling services and reside in the Commonwealth of Virginia, please visit us at heartmindrba.com for more information.